Good morning. Good morning.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Okay. How's your husband doing?
Good. Let's see, content of this meeting. Okay. Um, he's doing well. I mean, he had the stroke almost 2 years ago, so this is a
Oh,
normal
yeah.
every 8 week occurrence.
Oh,
Oh, Miss Gayla, is that correct? Take yourself off mute if you'd like. I assume you're not Gary.
I'm Gayla.
It's
Yeah,
nice to have you this morning.
thank you. We had some people say one time, "Oh, you're Gary and Gayla," and I'm like, "No, I'm just the Gayla part."
I love that. Yeah. My husband, he uses my name with his, but he's always called me Cindy, even though I prefer Cynthia. He didn't ask, he just did. And he has his email is Dean and Cindy Martin and everything. And he wanted me to have Dean and Cindy Martin something else. And I was like, no, because I for a while I needed my stepmother to send something. She goes, I don't want to send something that Dean's going to be getting into. And I was like, okay, no problem. And I get it. So, but I mean, I was married to a man that wasn't so crazy about having me around. So it's really nice to have one who is. That's what I keep telling myself when sometimes I was like, I don't have to be attached to everything of yours.
Right,
But
right.
believe me, it is a much better situation than the other way around. So
Good.
I know how the other participants so far this morning, I switched from a 10 o'clock appointment, a 10 o'clock meeting to a 9 o'clock, seeing if that would work. For me, I'm in Central Time Zone. I don't know what time zone you're in. So
Me
trying
too.
to figure out if 10 or 9 or 8 or whatever works the best for everyone. So we'll wait and see. We had some additional ladies last week, and so we'll see if maybe this isn't good. So where are you from, Gayla? Tell us a little bit about you and how you connected with me.
I connected with you through the Radiant Resilient program that
Okay.
occurred,
Yep.
which is very good, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in Lubbock, Texas. I'm
Oh,
a counselor,
oh,
and
nice.
normally I would not be able to do 9 or 10. But I had just had a cancellation, and I got your email, and I was like, "Oh, cool! I'll get to be a part of that this morning."
So
Thank you.
awesome. Do you do counseling online or in person?
Both.
Okay. And what kind of counseling do you do, if you don't mind saying?
Um, Pretty much all of it. I don't work with kids.
Okay.
Um, I work with parents, couples, individuals. I have one group that is grief counseling,
Mm-hmm.
um, and lots of depression, anxiety, isolation,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
all of those
Yeah.
things that people go through.
Yeah. Do you use, or I'm certain that you're familiar with the program Grief Share?
I am familiar with that. Yeah.
My stepmother, who my father passed away a few years ago now, after a year after his passing, went through Grief Share, and it so helped her that she became a
Mhm.
leader and she runs them periodically. She believes very much in it. And I have people in my local mentoring group that they've lost fathers, and so they've sent their mothers, and it's done really well for them. So it
My
sounds like
husband and
it's a really
I have
impressive thing. Go ahead.
my husband and I have facilitated that in the past.
Okay.
And we've kind of taught others how to do it, and so we've kind
Hmm.
of passed it on to
Yeah.
some others at this point. But yeah, it's a good program.
Yeah, it is. Well, good for you. And did you say, do you do it online or in person?
Both.
Both. Oh, good. Good for you. I don't know how much you know about me, but I've done pastoral counseling for many years, uh, coming from the standpoint of being a pastor. So I
Mhm.
really, not really a counselor, but giving pastoral counsel.
Right.
And I've been on staff of 2 or 3 churches in my last 30 years, in which I was the pastoral counsel. And so I have a little bit of a knowledge of some of the things that you're sought out for. And I think maybe sometimes people seek out a pastor a little bit differently than a counselor. Sometimes it's both the same.
Mhm.
Some people I had to refer out above
True.
where I was. They needed medication and other things, and I
Right.
couldn't help with that. And so, but yeah, I really learned a lot. And yeah, it takes a special person, and let me preface that by I am not that person to be able to do that really long term. And one of my uh, strengths, I guess it is a strength, but it's not always seen as such in that setting. That's why I'm not the perfect person for it. I can do it, but it's not my first thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm very blunt and to the point. And I would find many people that would come in and they would tell me what they wanted and what their problem was. And I would say, well, from my viewpoint, that's not your problem. This is your problem. And I
Mhm.
can't do anything about the people that are not in this room, but I can help you with
Right.
this. And many of them would be, okay, thanks. And they would leave. And then I would hear through the grapevine that they were mad and be like, and then they'd arrive 6 months later and say, okay, I'm ready to work on that now. So, I'm probably not, I'm not probably, I know I'm not the hand holding type it's hard for me to get them there, right? To walk them into it. I also know there's such a skill in leading people in questions so that they discover it themselves, because I also know if they discovered it themselves, it's much more powerful than if I tell them. So, or anybody.
Mm.
So
True.
anyway, my hat's off to you and all that you do. So, well, Debbie is with me a lot, the other participant this morning. She is a lover. She writes a Substack column. Tell her a little bit about your Substack column, Debbie. I won't blow your horn for you. I'll let you do that yourself. Mhm,
I write mostly devotional material, but I do go on other subjects sometimes.
mhm.
By the way, Gayla, you said you're from Lubbock, Texas, and that's Buddy Holly territory. I'm a
It is.
huge fan of his, and he was before my time, but still, I'm a huge, huge fan of his. Um, and I'm also a life coach. I have a certification for life coaching. I'm an
Okay.
ordained minister, and I just started recently doing my own Bible teaching in another group. And I love God. I love my husband. I love my cat. I'm disabled. I have a lot of autoimmune diseases. I'm very sick all the time, but I'm a very blessed person. I'm so grateful to God. And I love Cynthia's teaching as she's very blunt and to the point, but that's what you need. You can't have fluff all the time. And I highly recommend her. She's a wonderful teacher.
Ah, well, thank you. I wasn't looking for a compliment, but I will take it. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
you should.
So, what I want to do this morning is, unless somebody else has something else they want to chat about, I want to talk about what we've been studying over the last week in the She Blooms group. And I don't know, Gayla, if you're part of that group or not, but we've been talking about great women of our faith who did great things to influence Christianity, and actually did many of them did a lot of things for women in ministry too. It's just kind of very cool. And so this week I'm trying to open up my paper, and I'm not very good apparently of talking and opening up a new document. So I got it ready this morning and now I got to find it. Have you ever had that trouble where you think you know where it is, but you don't? It's under content. There we go. And it's in this file. I know it is. It's dated today, so it's got to be here, Thursday, May 22nd. There we go. So I just want to talk about any of the women that we had information on this week. Bertha Smith. Any of you heard of her before?
No.
I hadn't
Mm-mm.
either until I researched her life. Or Louisa Stead, Stad. I,
Mm-mm.
I imagine most of us know Corey Tenboom.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, what what an amazing person she was, and what she
Yeah.
went through with the Holocaust and all that. And
Yeah.
then later on, that she was in church, and one of the Nazi soldiers was there,
Mhm.
and every time I read that story, I get goosebumps. It's just
Yeah.
what an amazing person.
Yeah. And you know, if I remember the story correctly, or, you know, that I think she was sharing and she saw into the audience he was there. And she knew
Yes.
immediately that what she had preached her whole life. And I've run into these moments, things that we have talked about and
Mm,
things that we believe. And I'm sure this happens with you, Gayla. Things
mhm.
that we would tell another person, we look at it, we think, shoot, I got to listen to my own advice. Or
Yeah,
do I
right.
really believe that? This is where the rubber meets the road. I mean,
Hmm.
this is real. I mean, it happens to me. I think, well, this is what you tell people. Do you believe it? If you
Oh,
don't, you need to shut your
yeah,
mouth. Come on,
I know.
is that right?
I go
So,
Yeah.
through
yeah,
that all the time. Yeah.
exactly. Another woman that we focused on this week is called her name is Dorothy Day. And I keep looking at it and I
Hmm.
keep thinking Doris Day. No, no, no.
Yeah.
Dorothy Day. Really, a really awesome woman. And then of course we looked at Mother Teresa,
Mm,
which you know, I mean, what can we say about her? And then
exactly.
Elizabeth Howells. I don't know if you know about the
Mm,
Howells and the Judsons. We also, I think, looked at Anne Judson. Both of them are wives of very famous missionaries. Yet, even though sometimes as married individuals, and if we're married to someone who's famous, right? I'm married to Dean Martin. Not that one, but I do get a lot of jokes when I call hotels.
yeah.
I always know how old the registrar is by a joke that they come back with, or they're silent. And then I know if they just keep right on going, I think, oh, they're young. They have no clue.
Yeah. They don't have a clue.
So, but those women who were married to men who were famous that or became very famous, you know, sometimes they become a shadow of the famous person and vice versa.
Mm,
And I want to talk a little bit about that today. So let's just look at Bertha Smith. And I just want to go over their life accomplishments and the lessons that we can learn from her life. And from her life, we can learn that God can use a willing heart at any age. Isn't that
mm,
great? Some because she was called in early adulthood and she served as a missionary until she was 70 years old. And then she continued in ministry until she was 99 plus. She was just short of 100.
mm.
So she reminds us that availability is often more important than ability, which we hear that, but it's hard to
Yes.
really put into practice in our life, right?
Mm,
Because we think, oh, I'm too old. And she didn't retire from her calling, she just redirected it. Oh, I love that message because as we go through seasons in life, I was talking about this in a group that I lead here in Pensacola called, it's on a glow group for any of you that are familiar with that. I lead the local a glow group just because I don't have anything else to do, right? And we had our speaker came in and talked about vision, and all of us are also in what I like to refer to as a second half of our life. And, you know, they were talking about vision. And I believe that as in seasons, our vision, my call has always been the same since I was 17, but it has changed over the years in the season that I'm in. So, or it's expanded, or I've seen
mm,
a bigger part of it. So, I love that she just redirected it, and her life teaches us that our purpose doesn't expire with age, and spiritual influence grows with time and obedience. Love that. The other thing that she taught us is she endured war. She was imprisoned. She was displaced, and she had cultural barriers that she had to come overcome. And rather than give up, she adapted the press on mentality, right, that we see in the word. And even after being expelled from China, she pioneered in missions in Taiwan. And her perseverance reveals that hardship is not the end, it's often the doorway to the next assignment. Isn't that
mm,
great if we could only remember that? That
mm.
hardship isn't the end, but it's the doorway to the next assignment. And then the third life lesson from Bertha Smith is that a life anchored in prayer can spark revival. When teaching girls in China or establishing a prayer center in South Carolina, Bertha's legacy is marked by her deep prayer life and a focus on the Holy Spirit led revivals. And she lived what she preached. I love that kind of a woman, right? Demonstrating that sustained prayer isn't just personal, it becomes a generational influence. I thought those were pretty good life lessons. So
Mm,
many out of each one of those, we can take so much to heart
mm,
over what she accomplished in her life. And one of my heart cries is that I leave a lasting legacy. Now, I have 4 daughters, and that my legacy will live on through them. I know that. But I also believe that God puts us here to minister in our time, but also what we do today will help build what will happen tomorrow as well.
mm.
So that's really cool. The next woman that we talked about is Louisa Steed, Stad. And I keep pronouncing it because I want to call her Steed, and it's Stead. And her life lesson says that out of the deepest pain can come some of the most powerful praise. How many of you know that's
Mm.
true?
Oh
Amen.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so I did not know this about her, but she is the woman who wrote the hymn, "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus." Do you guys know that hymn?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
She wrote that hymn. Is that
Oh
not cool?
wow.
When I was doing research on her, I thought, oh, I didn't know that. Isn't that cool? And
Mhm.
her husband
Mm.
drowned. And
Oh
uh, she wrote those words. So she was a young single mother and she was in financial hardship. And yet, rather than grow bitter, she penned the words of that trust and worship song that
wow.
continues to encourage believers worldwide. Her
Mm,
life reminds us that even in our darkest moments, God can birth something eternal and beautiful through surrendered pain. And I think so often, I look back and I've already alluded to that Dean, who is my husband now, is my second husband. My first husband, we were married for 23 years. We were lived together for 17. And so from the 18 to the 23, we were working on trying to figure out if we could make it work. We didn't live together from 18 to 23. The marriage finally completely dissolved after 23 years. But that was the most painful, horrific thing I have ever been through in my entire life. But out of that most painful, horrific thing in my entire life, I got real and completely right with God. Was I a Christian before? Sure. Did I attend church? Absolutely. I was 38 when it ended. So for 38, almost 38 years, I'd been
mhm.
in church. I knew a lot about God. I believed in God. I was raising my children as Christian. I was sending them to private Christian school. I was doing the things. But when I went through that horrific divorce, loss of my marriage, which I was a party to, neither one of us cheated on each other. We just couldn't. And even today, all the things that I know, I'm not sure I could make it work. And
Mm,
it was just so painful. I lost who I was. I had put everything I was into that because good Christians don't divorce. It was not something I did. It was something that he did. He initiated the divorce. And so out of it though, I became what I refer to as my so saved. I surrendered fully and 100% to God, and he had to rebuild me from the ground up.
mm.
And so out of that place, I look back and it is the most treasured time of my life as well. So our worst can also be a treasure because out of which bad things, good things can come. Have either one of you experienced something like that in your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I, you had just talked about leaving a legacy, and I mean, I'm sure I've mentioned to you that I have the struggle of infertility in my life, and this always like was a big thing for me. Not my husband's like it didn't bother him that we couldn't have kids. It didn't bother him at all. He said, I love you and I'm happy and that's all
Right.
that matters. But as a woman, I think it affects you more. And I've I mean, this has been a part of my life now for well, I mean, I'm over the over 50. I won't say how,
Right.
far
Yeah.
over, but you know, I had a hysterectomy when I was very young because I had a lot of health issues. And
Hmm.
I've gotten better at handling it, but I still say to myself, like, there is a part of me that I always felt was missing because I didn't have kids. And in
Hmm.
fact, just recently I said to my husband, I said, do you know, I mean, we've been together for 25 years. We've been married 20 years. And I said, 21 actually. I said, you know, if we had a kid when we first got married, our child would be like 20 years old now. He's like, why do you torture yourself like that? Why do you do that to yourself? So it still bothers me because I'm like, what's my legacy? Am I going to be known as the crazy Jesus girl who loved cats? I mean, I still get muddled about my purpose, my legacy. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's hard.
No, no, I don't want you to lie. Yeah,
It's very
true,
hard to,
exactly.
come to
Yeah,
terms with it sometimes.
yeah,
So yeah, I get that, what you were just saying, definitely.
yeah.
But and I don't want to take up all the time, but
No, that's okay.
on the other hand, being able to share my experience with other people that have gone through the same thing, they say how much I've helped them and I've given them hope and encouragement, and I'm glad I'm able to do that. But there's still a part of me that's like, why did it have to be me? Why? So it's very hard.
No, I understand. And Gayla, please feel free to jump in anytime you want. That's what this is about. But I can say that I just was on a meeting prior to this and talking with a friend, and she struggled with, why am I here? And she struggled that she felt like, there was no, she knew that God loved her. She knew that she had value. But yet she thought, so I just gonna sit here until I die from now on. I mean, that's a little bit dramatic, but along that same lines. And I'm gonna tell you something that I tell her that I'm gonna tell you. You may have even heard me say it before. It's a soapbox that I get on, and I believe that it's very true. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. So when we discover who we are, who God has created us to be, there's a blueprint for all humanity, but there's also
Mm,
a uniqueness for each one of us. Our fingerprint proves that. The scripture proves that each
mm,
one of us, before we were born, God wrote a plan. So when we get to the place that we are able to embrace fully and receive fully, sometimes we have to get wounds out of the way. Sometimes we have to get mindset out of the way. The things that we believe about ourselves, our lives, our character, God's character, his nature, all those kinds of things that are a little bit misaligned. But when we're able to embrace who God created us to be, our own value and our own purpose and our own uniqueness, when we're fully who we are, um, we're human beings. Like, wow, Cynthia, that's super deep. But we live is that we're human doings, and we're
yeah.
always looking for what to do instead of what to be. I think I went off the screen with my hand. I was over there going like, and so what we do and the effect of who we are comes out of who we are, right? The human being part, not the doing.
Mm,
What God has called us to do and what God has created us to do comes out of who we are. We be, and out of who we be, our purpose flows. And it's easy because we just be who we are in people and in circumstances and in our work and what we believe we're to do and how we're believed to serve comes out of who we are.
mm,
And so keep with me, Deb. We'll get there, and we'll get there. And I don't want to turn this into a pastoral counsel thing. I wouldn't do that to you in a this kind of a situation. But I would say that there are some misaligned beliefs about what happened to you, about being infertile. There may be even some anger towards God, which I may have even mentioned to you before.
mm,
And you think, well, how can you be angry at God? He's perfect. Well, our emotions are just emotions, right? They're not
mhm,
logical. They just are. And so there are other things that we can work on, that we can um, bring. you into a fuller expression of who you are so that you can see this is not a surprise by God. He's not up there saying, "Ah, I can't wait to see what happens next," or "Oh no, what will happen next," right? He
Mm,
has your life and he knows all about it. And I want to be, like I said, I don't want to turn this into that. And I know that this is something that you've struggled with because I've heard, you talk about it before.
mhm,
And the important part is for me also is that you don't think that I'm making a judgment of you because of that. Even though I've talked about how my deepest pain has become my deepest blessing, it
mm,
still leaves a stain in my life, right?
mm,
We were not created to divorce. We live in an evil world. We live in a culture where those kinds of things, the scripture says, because of the hardness of their hearts, right?
mm,
And so it's still a stain, but it's also the greatest blessing in my life because I've taken what I could out of it and rebuilt something
mhm.
good out of something that's evil. Do you have anything that you'd like to add, Gayla? You're probably better in this area than I am.
Well, actually, what I was thinking as I was hearing Debbie speak was in your voice, and this is how Cynthia introduced you to me. Debbie is a lover.
Mhm.
And in your voice, I can hear that.
Yeah.
And it made me think of the statement that Cynthia brought up at the very first. She said, hardships are not the end,
Hmm.
the doorway to the next assignment.
Come on now.
Mm,
And
Absolutely.
God knew all this love that you had to give, and He gave you the direction of where He wanted that love to go. It was
Yeah.
not to a child, it was to others to
Hmm.
further His kingdom.
Yeah.
And so as you were speaking, it was just blessing my heart to
oh,
see
oh,
and to hear
Yeah.
how you have used that hard time and that dark valley. You didn't stay broken, but you broke through.
Yeah. So
oh,
good, Kayla. Yeah.
thank you. I mean, that
Yeah.
just gave me goosebumps that you
Yeah.
said that,
Yeah.
really.
And so sometimes we get stuck in, we don't see ourselves truly well. And what
Mm,
we do, we don't see it of great value because it's just who we are. It's just natural.
right.
It's just easy. Right. And so we don't see that as, well, anybody, well, I'll pick on me, right? Because I don't, I'm a big target. Um, Anybody can talk, and heaven knows I can talk. What do you want to talk about, and how long do you want me to talk? And I'll try to make sure I stay within the limit, right? I was born a talker. Every report card in my whole life said Cindy talks too much. And so that is my life, is talking. Doing some prayer and some study for the next year, which I think you guys have seen. I put it up on the Facebook group. Some of the things I'm going to be doing over the next year, and praying before the Lord. And I said, we got down to what I want to do is I want to plan and I want to talk. And so anything out of planning and talking is not my purview, even though I have a lot of administrative, but my preference is to plan and talk. And so those are the two things that I do really well. And so, or I like hearing my voice. But the point is a lot of people are afraid to make a video. I made 9 videos yesterday, plus a 30-minute live video that I did in the car while I was waiting for my husband at
Yes.
the doctor's. I love to talk. I love to teach. I love to share. I love to research. I love to do that sort of thing. But I have a lot of people that are like, how can you do that? How do you know what to say? Oh, I just show up and the 30 years of putting God in comes out. It is what it is. I
Mm,
think it's easy. It's the easiest thing I can do is talk, right? But it's hard for someone else. Now, that's an obvious, but we all look at ourselves at what we do and we invalidate it because it's easy for us.
mm,
And what you do, I can't do, or I can't do as well. And you have much more compassion than I do, right? I've been straight out about that. You know, you go through and you do ministry tests, and mercy is really low for me. I have to really think about that. Doesn't occur to me. And I know that's a huge part of who God is in the bowels of who he is. People will say they did this nice thing, and I'll think, oh, that's nice. I wish I'd have thought of it. I could have did that, but it doesn't occur to me, right? Because it's not who I am.
Mm.
Doesn't excuse me from being merciful. You know what I mean? But you have much more mercy and much more compassion, and you ooze the love of Jesus, and you love Jesus, and you love people. So God's going to take you really far with that. I think that's really awesome. Thank you, Gayla, for sharing. I loved it. Perfect, perfect.
Thank you both.
So Louisa, she the last statement I said is that God can birth something outside of
Mm.
us through something that we surrender in
Mhm.
pain to him. um, Then also the second one is that she faced multiple challenges, right? Fragile health, the death of her husband, financial instability. Still, she pursued her missionary calling. One or two of those, most of us would give up. Most
Mm.
Americans would give up. First, she was in South Africa, and then later in Zimbabwe, which in my view, that would be part of Africa, because I don't know my geography. And even when she returned to the field after years of illness, her faithfulness through personal loss and health struggles teaches us that God's calling on our life remains, even when circumstances are hard. And he equips us to continue in purpose despite the obstacles.
Mm.
Again, I've been talking to my mentoring group. I have a local mentoring group, and we meet on Sunday evenings. It's out of our local ministry called Believer's House. And we've been talking about war, and we're equating natural war and supernatural war and how they correlate a lot. And one of the things here in the United States, we don't recognize, I talked about this yesterday, so I don't want to take too much time.
Yeah.
Um, we don't think about war as much because our borders have not been um, attacked like Israel or Ukraine or Russia or some of these other countries that have invading forces.
Mm.
And so we have a tendency to say, yeah, we're at war, and we continue on with our life, right? But this woman dealt with that in her life, and she just continued on. So which I think that's really cool.
Mm.
The last lesson that I have on Louisa's life is she had unwavering faith that not only shaped her own ministry, it inspired the next generation. Her daughter, Lily, followed in her footsteps and became a missionary,
Mm.
continuing the legacy of service and sacrifice.
Wow.
And that hymn Louisa wrote, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus," is still sung today. So her story
Mhm.
shows us that a life anchored in trust and obedience can leave a spiritual inheritance that far outshines our lifetime story. I had a couple, actually, I've had three pretty strong mentors in my life. One is still alive, and the other two, the husband and the wife, they worked in different areas in the ministry, and I worked with both of them. And both of them have graduated to heaven, and they're in heaven. But I continue with the things that they taught me,
Mm.
because at times when I speak, the, what they have taught me comes out of their mouth. So much so, I have someone in my mentoring group that has been with me since 2005. And she said, and the gentleman's name, I'll just tell you because he's passed on, so I'll say his name. It's Bill Suddeth. And she'll say, that was Bill Suddeth coming out of your mouth right now. And I'll think, yeah, it was.
Mm.
So his influence in
Yeah.
me is there. And his wife, Janet, is the one who actually opened the door for ministry for me. I was invited to be an intern when I was in Bible school in the pastoral care office. I've never considered myself a pastor, not my gifting, nothing that I really ever thought I would do. And I was invited, and I had just prayed and told the Lord I would walk through any door that He opened. Ah! So they asked me, would you be interested in coming in and being an intern? And I said, yeah. So when I got there, the president of, or the head of pastoral care, who is my third mentor, she said, I have meetings. I want you to go in and sit with Janet, the one who has passed on. So I opened up the door and I come in. She said, "Oh, come in." And she was teaching on forgiveness. And she told a story. And then she looked at me and she said, "Cynthia, you take over this." And I was like, I'm just sitting in. I've never been in one of these. I don't know how this goes. And so she opened the door for ministry, and she was always doing that, pushing me to the
Mm,
front and pushing me to the front. And so even though they are not my mama and my daddy, they come out of me when I
mm,
share because they seeded in me and seeded in me. And believe me, I followed. If they were going somewhere, I was going to be there with them. And whenever they taught, I was there in the audience. Not only was I there in the audience, I got so I could almost mouth what they'd say next. And Bill, when we travel, we got invited to travel with them some, and he'd be in the middle of his thing and he'd get to coughing or he wasn't feeling good. So he'd say, "Cynthia, come up here and finish this." And so I would. And it would sound very much like he did because I was just doing what I knew. So back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, Debbie, you can do the same in other people. Because
mm,
when we seed and we seed and we seed, it grows root and it comes out again and it lives on for both all of us, right? The next person, and I'm going to speed up here so I don't take us forever, but the next person was Corey Tenboom.
mm,
All right, an ordinary woman can do extraordinary things when led by God. She was single, middle-aged, working in her father's watch shop, not likely a hero by worldly standards, yet her deep-rooted faith and daily obedience opened the door for her to become a life-saving force during one of the darkest times in history. Her life reminds us that we don't need fame, position, or special qualifications to be used mightily by God. Availability and obedience are what
mm,
he's looking for. How many of us today, especially Americans, I pick on Americans because I am one, we don't want to be uncomfortable, right? And I wonder
mm,
sometimes where we get this thing that we have to be comfortable and we won't step out and do something that's uh, frowned upon by someone else.
mm,
I see that over and over again. I think that's sad. She also taught that faith and forgiveness are stronger than hatred and suffering. Even after enduring the horrors of a Nazi imprisonment and death of her beloved sister, she chose forgiveness over
yeah,
bitterness. She later even met and forgave one of her former captors that we talked about. And her
mhm,
story teaches us that forgiveness is not a weakness, it's a spiritual strength. And it releases us from bondage even more than it frees the offender. So I say forgiveness is for us. True
mhm,
healing and victory come when we forgive as Christ forgave us. One story, I'll invite you guys if you know any stories about her, but the story I love, I've read her books, I have her books, and a story I read in one of her books is they talked to her about, she was humble and she all her life, she functioned in humility and she really made a name, right? And when she would go places to speak, she would have standing ovations and people would bring her gifts and flowers and all these things. And someone asked her, "How do you balance that with, you're still humble?" And she said, "Well, I smile and I thank everyone throughout the day. And at the end of the day, I gather all those accolades and all those flowers and I give them back to the Lord." That
mhm,
was so powerful to me. And she said, "And I offer them up to him and say, these are a gift for you." It just
mm,
touches me that
yeah,
she knew even when it was occurring, "Thank you, thank you. I'm gathering these, almost you can hear her say in her mind for Jesus." And then she gave them to him at the end of the day. I thought that was so powerful.
mm,
So powerful. Have any of you read any of her books?
mm-mm. No, I've just
I
read. I'm sorry. I just read bits and pieces about her, but I haven't read her books.
Yeah.
I
Gayla?
started the book. I just didn't get to finish it. And I will someday. I started it like years ago. Uh, it's on my to-do list.
You need to join a group where you're reading and you got to show up and say you read the chapter, right? That's what I have to do for accountability.
But one of my favorite stories from her is when she talks about being thankful and praising the Lord for fleas. That
Mm,
Oh
in the
yeah, yeah.
campground, there were fleas, and so the guards did not like to come in. But what it did was it gave them a space to bring others to Christ.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and I just thought, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
the women last week, I can't remember because they're all starting to blend together, but last week there was one of the women who um, she saved children out of temple prostitution. And her whole life she grew up in a family with blue eyes and she had brown eyes and she hated it.
Right.
And
Mhm.
when she went to India, she disguised herself and would go into the temples and she would discover where those children were. And then she would get them rescued out. And she said at that moment, she realized she was so thankful for her brown eyes because she would have never been able to pass
Mm.
herself off with blue
Yeah.
eyes.
I
And so
remember you
sometimes,
teaching that. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes some of the things that we think are the worst can be the best for
Yeah.
sure. The
Mm.
next woman we're going to talk about is Judson, Judson, Judson. Her husband, very famous man. I learned about him in Bible school. And her life lesson says that true calling requires courage, not comfort.
Mm.
And Ad Judson, willing left behind a comfortable life, a loving family, and familiar surroundings to face the unknown in a foreign land. Not for adventure, but for obedience to God. She endured the death of children, life-threatening illness, war, imprisonment of her husband, all without abandoning her mission. Her life teaches us that saying yes to God does not guarantee ease, but
Mm.
it does guarantee purpose. Real faith means that embracing the cost of obedience with open hands and a willing heart. Wow. Like again, I said, we like our comfort creature, we're
Mhm.
comfort creatures. So what I love also about Ann Judson is because she showed us that women have a vital role in the mission of God. Because in an era when women were expected to remain in the background, Ann Judson stood as a trailblazer. She didn't
Mm.
just accompany her husband, she taught, she translated scripture, she wrote, she preached through letters, she founded schools, and she led in education for girls. Her examples affirms that women are not only capable, but called to lead, to create, to influence, and shape nations through the gospel. Her life legitimized the role of women in missions and continues to inspire others to step into their calling with boldness. Praise God for them.
Mm.
People who go to other lands have my admiration. And her just have two more. Her faithfulness is fruitfulness. And Anne and Adoniram, I can never pronounce his name. It's
Yeah.
Adoniram. Adoniram, I guess is how you pronounce it. They labored for 6 years before their first Burmese converts, and they saw only
Mm.
18 converts in 9 years. How many people would give
Wow.
up and go home, right?
Mm.
Despite that discouragement and cultural resistance, she stayed faithful, and her translation work, teaching, and evangelism led a foundation that continued bearing fruit long after her death. Anne's life shows us that success in God's eyes is measured by faithfulness, not numbers.
Mm.
You may not always see your immediate results, but obedience to God always plants the seeds of internal impact. I was asked recently, there's been a little bit of scandal. There's always scandal in ministry. If you're a minister and you've been on inside of churches, you know that that always happens. And our eyes are not on ministries, our eyes are on Jesus. We have to remember that. But there's been a little bit of scandal involving one of the leaders of the Bible school that I went to. And, there's a group and and I just don't even go there anymore because I don't want to hear all the negative.
Mhm.
And rehashing evil is never good. And they sent out this thing to all graduates, and their question, they're taking a poll: do you regret ever going to such and such school? And I thought, that's ridiculous, I'm not answering it. They're just looking to keep this thing going.
Mm.
And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and finally I answered, and I wrote, no, I was called by God to go there. I have never ever been disappointed whenever I obeyed God. I will always treasure what I learned, and I'll hold it dear in my heart. And then I sent it off because I don't want to keep that going. But you know what I mean?
Yes.
Sometimes we just, some of the stuff that goes on, we just don't realize. And I'm like, no, I'm keeping my eyes on what God did in me and who He is, not what other people have failed at. Right. So,
Mm.
And I think the last one that I'm going to talk today, actually, I have two more, so I'm going to speed it up. The last one, or the next one, is Dorothy Day, which I didn't know a lot about her, but God can redeem any story for his glory. She was a political activism. She had failed relationships, an abortion, and she um, was transformed through motherhood, even her eventual conversion. She was actually Catholic. And she would get upset when people would say to her, call her a saint. And one of her famous sayings is she would say back, don't call me a saint, S-A-I-N-T. I don't want to be dismissed so easily. Now, the Bible tells us that when we become Christians, we are a saint. But sometimes people will call you, well, you're just a saint. Like that makes us irrelevant to the world.
Mhm.
So I understand what she was saying here. Don't dismiss me.
Yeah.
She sounds like she's probably a woman that would be a lot like me. She spoke out, right? So she also taught us that faith without action is impossible and incomplete. That's what the scripture
Mm.
says, right? Faith
Yeah.
without action is dead.
Dead.
It works, it says. But Dorothy didn't just pray, she put her prayers into practice, co founding the Catholic worker movement, including launching houses of hospitality and standing in solidarity with the poor laborers and civil rights leaders. And she showed that Christian faith demands a response to injustice. And her belief in the dignity of every human being and all the things that she did, she challenged us really to live out the gospel in radical and tangible ways. The last thing I want to say about her, well, two things, is that her conviction requires courage, right? Even when it's costly. So
Mhm.
she stood firm in her beliefs. And I saw three things: that it's important that we embrace our story. The Bible
Mhm.
tells us that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Right.
So our story is something that no one can take from you, and it's a way that we relate to others, and it's a way we minister to others. And that we need to live our faith out loud. Don't hide. Leave our light on the hill, right? Be the light that you were
Mhm.
created to be. And we're to stand up for the oppressed, even when it costs us. I think of in the Old Testament where um, it talks so much about not choosing, the wealthy over the less fortunate, and our weights and measures need to be even
Mhm.
for everyone. And we see that plays out in people's lives all the time, right?
Like Moses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he's one of my favorites. Mother Teresa, I don't know if I really need to go through all of what she did. Just craziness things, right? I mean, just a small little old lady, right? That did great things.
Mm.
She said, or her life says, a call to serve must be lived out in action. And again, number two, you don't have to be famous to be faithful. I love it. But faithfulness will make you known. And holiness is found in hard places. What a great statement to sum up who Mother Teresa was
Mm.
and what she did. And I promise this is the last one. Elizabeth Howells. I mentioned that we're going to talk about two people whose husbands were very famous. And this Elizabeth Howells married to Rees, Rees Howells. And he became known around the world for his bold faith in his public ministry. And Elizabeth was a powerful spiritual force behind the scenes. She embraced the life of intercession. We don't talk about this as much. A ministry of a deep life is sometimes unseen. It's a spiritual labor that undergirded that global revival, missionary expansion that her husband walked in. Her
Mhm.
faithful prayers and spiritual discernment and willingness to carry spiritual burdens quietly shaped the direction of their ministry and the lives that they touched.
Mm.
So our lesson from that is never underestimate the power of your hidden prayers. True kingdom impact often begins in the quiet place of intercession. Stay away from stages, but fully step in to God's heart. I know that there's a scripture I talked about yesterday in one of the videos that I was recording, that he's a rewarder of those who faithfully seek him, right? We don't think about that. And how do
Yeah.
we seek him? We seek him through his word and through prayer and through expressing his life to others. Elizabeth was marked by deep personal sacrifice, leaving her infant son, which this is really very hard for me to see. They left their son and went to serve in Africa. During, she endured really a burden of spiritual warfare for the people that they served, and her willingness to give up comfort, reputation, and even recognition to follow God's call produced a revival, and they trained missionaries, and they laid a foundation for generous generations of intercessors through the Bible College of Wales. So they served in
Wow.
Wales and created the Bible College there. The path of obedience is rarely easy, but it's always fruitful. Sacrifice for the sake of the gospel may not always be seen by others, but it's always seen by God and used for eternal impact.
Mm.
Just because we don't see the results doesn't mean there are no results, right? And one of the things that I'm getting some sort of notice about some group challenge. It's not mine, must be somebody else's, because I don't have a group challenge today. And her steadfast partnership with her husband multiplied the kingdom work. Elizabeth's story illustrates the power of spiritual partnership. Her role in marriage wasn't passive, it was foundational. And she prepared medically for the mission field because she was a nurse. She co-led revival efforts. She sustained a prayer-driven atmosphere that helped birth a movement. Her quiet strength enabled the public ministry of her husband. Even after Reese's death, her influence continued through their son's leadership and the ongoing legacy of their joint work. The lesson of her life also is that you don't have to lead from the front to lead with power.
Mm.
That is so true. And whether we don't see it that way, and we think about it, we think, yeah, that's true. But sometimes we don't implement like that. Whether in marriage or ministry or sisterhood, steadfast spiritual partnership can multiply and reach and bring fruit to the work of God that He has called you to do. Thought those women were fabulous, and I loved the lessons of their life this
Mm.
week. And I'm just being so blessed with all the stuff that I'm learning when I'm researching who these women are. So, any comments?
Well, it's very interesting to find out about all these people that,
Yeah.
and the way they served, not expecting a pat on the back, and let's face it, we all want a pat on the back sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing how they just humbly served to help other people and do good things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure, for sure. They certainly act as a inspiration, right?
Yeah,
And as I
definitely.
said, I think when I started that they have opened the path for us and given us
Hmm.
something that we can look at as an example and people that we can relate to, right? And we can put our big girl britches on and move on, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to be doing, let's see. Yeah, I think we got a week left. We'll be finishing it up. And I'm really excited about May 30th and May 31st. So you guys have to check that out and come back next week. I think I'll wait till after the 31st to have our next coffee and chat, and I'll put that in the group. But Gayla, I'm so happy that you got to come. Is there any time that would make it so that you would be able to attend, or is it just you're booked up?
Most of the time I'm pretty booked up. But keep me on your list so that when I see
Yeah.
those emails that says, "Hey, 15 minutes, we're gonna,"
I have more people come in on that 15-minute reminder than I do the day before or mark your calendar next week. I think that's what it is because you're like, oh, I got time right now, and you join in. So yeah,
exactly.
I will. I'll make sure that you get that. And
Yeah,
yes,
this has
I'd
been
love to have you.
encouraging. I do believe that God gives us divine appointments that
Yeah,
we don't know are
yeah,
coming,
Mm.
yep,
um, because we need to hear things, and
yep,
I did, and I
yeah.
appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad. And one of the things that it's so important to me is that I give voice to people than these kinds of things. Even though I'm a talker, I try to stop myself and make sure. And I even start, I remind myself if somebody else has something else they want to talk about, let's do that first. Because if you leave me, I could be here forever, right? I have a clock and it's huge right in front of my monitor above. It's right there so I can look so I don't run people over because their whole life isn't sitting around waiting to hear me talk. I'm surprised, but it's really true. You guys don't wake up at night thinking, oh, Cynthia's going to talk today. Right?
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
it is. But, I can't help talk about the things that I think are so cool. So, in June, I do want to mention, in June, I'm running a challenge starting June 2nd through the 7th. So it's a Monday through Saturday challenge, and it's based on the book of John Bunyan's classic, The Pilgrim's
Yeah,
Progress.
I signed up for that.
Good. And I have found, and I'll just tell you, but there's something to doing something in the group. There's a uh, available on YouTube. There's the cartoon version of the whole
Mm,
story. And so that's what we're going to be using is that cartoon version. But I'm going through, I'm not completely done yet, and putting out, because it's allegorical. And so sometimes we get confused, even though at the time we think, oh, that's so cool. But then later we forget. I'm going through and writing out all those names, and we're going to be talking about what those allegorical subjects mean.
mm,
So that to me is the interaction part, and we'll have a lot of application type stuff. So the first one's
mm,
like first video is 2 minutes. We'll watch it together, and then we'll have discussion. And then the next one I think is 6 minutes, and then we'll have discussion. So
mm-hmm,
each class will
mm,
be an hour long, and we'll be going through that. And it's such a foundational. Um, uh, there's another book out there. I thought about it in the night. I thought, I wonder if I should do that sometime. It's by Hannah Hennard. It's called oh shoot, right on the tip of my tongue. It's about fear. Um, Heinz Place, Heinz Feet in High Places, Hannah Hennard. And it's I read it. I was recommended by my counselor back in the midst of that mess. And she had me read it. It was about the main character is called Very Afraid. That's her name.
mm,
And so I really got into allegory type stories with that, but it's those things you have to kind of really break them down. Now wait a minute, because you're really into it, and you're almost not realizing you're learning life lessons, right? So we're going to be doing that in
mm.
June, and that's free. The first day I sent out an email and it said it was $67, and I was like, oh shoot, I sent the wrong link. Because I do sell it too, but I'm going to be doing, but I do that in a 6-week course. This
Mm.
one's just going to be a 6-day challenge, and it's free. So the next day I sent out the right one. I was like, uh-oh. I send myself my own videos because I read them to say, oh wow, that didn't make any sense. Because I don't write, I talk.
I'm gonna have to go and pop
Okay.
out. I've got a client, but
Okay.
again, I appreciate it, and
Oh, well, come
have a good
anytime,
day.
Gayla. I loved having you. Come
Thank
in
you.
and share your
It
heart. And I
was
get it.
very
I'm
nice
going to be
meeting
closing
you.
down here before 10 as well. So anyway, bless you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks. So then after the challenge uh mid month, I'm going to be offering a couple other things, and towards the end of the month, and that's going to be the system. We'll be doing these themes every month. I'll be handling the coffee and chat once a week, and we'll be talking about the things that I posted
Hmm.
or whoever shows up, whatever they want to chat about.
Okay.
And that's how I've got the rhythm figured out finally. I
Mm,
really spent some time before the Lord and mapped this all out, and I feel good about this is yep, this is what God wants me to do. And I
mm,
got rid of a lot of distraction things that I had kept watching, and the Lord has told me so many times over and over again, you know, use what you know. And I keep looking, for more. And I think that's
mhm,
something that happens. We think we don't know enough. Well, as I said, if I just come and be me, those who I can help will show up. And
mm.
if I can't, I can't serve the whole world anyway. So, and I don't want to
Yeah,
be somebody I'm not anyway. So
yeah.
that's the plan. Pray for me,
Sounds good.
pray for the
I will.
ministry. And Debbie, I always love to see your smiling face, and I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. I
And
appreciate
I
it.
know God's going to continue to use you and do great things. So,
Oh, thank you. I
all
appreciate
right.
that.
You're welcome. And all right, girlfriend, I'm going to let you go. So if you got something to do at 10, you're free because I'm promising everybody will be out within an hour.
Thank
God
you
bless
so
you.
much for today.
See you next
Take
time, if
care.
not
All
before.
right.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.